God of Weapons isn't your typical Vampire Survivors Club. Yeah, sure, you're going to spend some time walking around in circles killing enemies. You don't have to collect the XP though, so that's a little easier. You're also going to spend almost as much time, if you're anything like me, even more time, in your inventory, re-rolling the shop and rearranging your items to maximize the stats and bonuses they give from being adjacent to each other. That's right, God of Weapons draws inspiration from inventory management games in addition to games like Vampire Survivors. And as someone who lost over 100 hours to the launch of backpack battles, I spent way too much time in this game. And by that I mean I spent way too much time rearranging everything in my inventory to maximize all the bonuses, then realizing, hey, actually if I turn it sideways I can get even more bonuses. And so I did it all again. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking for a challenge, this probably isn't going to be the game for you, since this is much easier than many of the other Vampire Survivor-like games that I've played. If you want something more difficult, check out Megabonk. But it does feel very different to the standard bullet heaven game of kill swarms of enemies, pick roguelike perks, rinse and repeat. Because instead, God of Weapons is much more about putting together a cool build and the inventory management aspect. It's $6 on Steam, with the DLC being $3, and the DLC is well worth it because you can play a summoner in a bullet heaven game. So personally, I'd say I very much got my money's worth out of this one. And if anything I've said so far is interesting to you, then stay tuned as I'm going to be going over more details about the game, the characters, and how to put together a build. So here is the battle arena. This is where you fight enemies, and collect gold, and collect EXP, all of which you need to get stronger and of course become the God of Weapons. Here we've got some regular enemies and a few elites, which definitely didn't get spawned in because of my own greed. No, they just happened to live here. It's fine. This is their home. Yeah, I'm going to dodge around because I do not want the enemies to hit me. I'm also going to do my best to dodge their fireballs. But if I do get hit, this is what defensive stats like armor and recovery stats like lifesteal are useful for. Meanwhile, all my weapons are attacking automatically. Their attack range, their damage, their crit, all that determined by your stats and very often synergies, but I am actively dashing around. Some rooms have traps. Other rooms don't. You'll also occasionally see barrels spawn like that one. These can give you power-ups, they can also explode to damage enemies, and sometimes they just contain a lot of money. Once the timer ticks down to 0, congratulations, you have survived the wave. Like so. And so here we go on to the next screen. This is where you manage your inventory. It starts pretty small, but as you continue to play, it gets larger and larger. Every time you level up, you can expand your inventory. And there's always places where your inventory could be expanded to. Emphasis on could because you are ultimately the one deciding this. So here, I might want to expand my inventory over to the left to reposition some of my long swords, for reasons that I'll get into in just a moment. I've now made some space over here, but I'm going to have to take some stuff and put it outside so that I can start repositioning things. Now, why might I want to do this? Because this central tattered banner gives a bonus to armor and melee power based on adjacent weapons and adjacent armor items. Right now, I had the longsword lying across it like this, which means 1, 2, 3 of its slots are all taken up by the single item, providing no additional bonuses. So instead, what I'm going to do is put this like so, same exact level of bonuses, but I can use these 3 slots for smaller items like the swords placed differently, like this. All of a sudden I get way more armor. If I instead did not want to do this, did not want to give a bonus to armor, I could instead give a bonus to melee power. Maybe like this, I have +3 melee power because I've got an armor item, this helmet, adjacent, and the longsword right over here. Why did I move that down? Because adjacent armor items gain +3 armor from the longsword. So watch my armor total. 54 here, put it up here, 57. Down to 54, up to 57. Which of course means that ideally what I want to do is rearrange everything in my inventory here so that all of my armor items are in between 2 longswords rather than simply next to 1. That way I get to double dip on the bonuses. And yes, this extra single slot here, that's intentional because later there's a 1x1 armor piece that I can put here and it'll get all those nice juicy bonuses. Some items don't have adjacency bonuses. A good example of this is the short sword, which gives bonus damage for each other sword in your inventory. So the more swords that I have, the better. Okay, I've rearranged my inventory like so. Here's the thing, I have a whole bunch of extra space. What am I going to do with it? Buy more stuff, like this potion amulet, where I gain health for every floor. This is going to be very nice because I'm floor 10 out of 20, so it will trigger 10 times. I also might want to get a longsword. Why? I already have 2 longswords. Well, because I can use the combine feature. Longsword plus longsword equals longsword of a higher tier, or in this case, longsword plus longsword plus longsword equals longsword of the higher tier. And I'm just going to demonstrate that quickly by playing a little inventory Tetris. Combining does cost gold, so make sure you have the gold. And hey, if you can't afford something or you don't want to buy it right now, you can just right-click to lock and middle mouse button to vanish. That way it won't be offered again. Here we go, a short sword. I can sell my current sword, replace it with a short sword. I could have also just bought the short sword and put it here, but selling is a good way to get a quick little refund. I can buy a mace, which does not synergize with my build at all. Yeah, the game doesn't stop you. Don't do that. It's a waste of money, but hey, I make mistakes, or in this case, demonstrate things, so you don't have to. Instead, I'm looking for some extra items to fill these slots. Oh look! Remember how I said there's a 1x1 armor item? That is the bracer. Goes here, provides a nice amount of armor. I'm up to 88. I'm almost armor capped, meaning I'm going to be super tanky, and I can fill the rest of my slots with things that increase my damage, like more swords. Watch this, 451 DPS. I put this in my inventory, 496. I gain a significant amount of damage. Another thing added with the DLC is the Eternum Anvil. You can use this to randomly enhance stats. In this case, I got damage, which is pretty much the best possible outcome. Also, you can buy potions like the Elixir of Last Breath. This puts me at half health in the next round, but gives me a revival, so I can die and come back. And maybe I'll buy this for a little bit of melee power and attack speed. And so from here, I just click next floor and on to the next round. So now let's dive into some of the game's systems in more detail, starting with the tower's entrance. This is where you go to select your character. For example, I could select the king. Now, each character has 3 aspects. So for the king, there's king, which gives you bonuses to luck and resource gain, plus gives you damage for having high-tier items and damage penalties for having low-tier items. On the other hand, you have the vial, an aspect of a warlock who gives you magic power based on vitality. You lose luck for having 5 vitality, and you can only use enchanted and life-stealing weapons, which makes it particularly easy to scale because quite a few of the life-stealing effects can do things like also give you vitality, or give you damage bonuses based on your lifesteal, which synergizes really well if you have a bunch of magic power weapons. Now, some characters have restrictions. For example, the Golem aspect of the Juggernaut gains plus 50 armor and gains melee power for each 2 armor, allowing you to scale damage by stacking defenses and making sure you have a good baseline tankiness. But you cannot equip ranged weapons, so you're going to have to get close. You have a lower dash distance, meaning it's much harder to get away from enemies, and you can't use dodge to avoid damage. In other words, you're just going to have to eat a lot of hits to the face. Good thing armor modifications are 100% more effective. Now, after you select a character, you get to pick your starting weapon. Each different class has its own starting weapon options. Here there's the Warhammer, Flail, Cleaver, and Halberd. Some of these options will be locked when you start, but unlock fairly quickly. After that, you get to pick your starting item. In general, each aspect has a starting item that's somewhat helpful. The Crust, for example, adjacent melee weapons receive +1 base damage for each 2 armor. I wonder if that'd be useful on the armor stacking class. Alternatively, you could have the Iron Core, where adjacent armor pieces give +30% armor, making it easier to stack armor, and you have a bunch of attack range. Or alternatively, life-stealing weapons gain bonus lifesteal, and adjacent vitality items have vitality. You kind of want to cluster stuff around your starting item. Just keep in mind that these are not unlocked immediately. So, for example, on the Plague Doctor, I have the Gas Mask unlocked, but I don't have either of these. So I could play the Plague Spectre and reach 100% crit chance to unlock this, or I could kill 10 elite enemies using the Plague status as the Plague Patron, a different aspect, to unlock this item. In general, the unlock conditions are play through the character once, and you should be good to go. Let's jump into difficulty. 1 is easy, 5 is hard. Keep going until you struggle. In addition, there's a couple more things around the tower. The first of which is meta progression. You collect these fun little Titanite shards, and you use them to do things like give yourself a baseline projectile power, or give yourself gold at the start. You can also refund these if you want to reallocate them, and some of them are quite important, such as Fate's Favor that allows you to tip the scale of fate, more on that in just a second, or increase the tier of your starting weapon by 2 with Tier Up. Oh, and if you want to get more of a Titanite, just increase the Titanite drop chance. If you like achievement hunting, check out the Monolith of Wishes. If you're like me and you just focus on item unlocks, you don't look at this very much. Now, last up before heading out, you can go into the Armory. This allows you to try different weapons. You can see all the weapons you have unlocked. You can then pick them up and even attack a dummy. So you can see this just kind of snakes around. Over here at the table, you get to interact with the Armory system and unlock new weapons. To do so, you must meet the weapon's unlock condition, which in this case, trigger 5 summoning circles in a single run. Or in this case, the unlock condition is unknown, meaning it's probably tied to a character aspect that I don't yet have unlocked. And over here you can see all the stuff that I do have unlocked, of which there is a lot, especially since I recently got the DLC and I'm still working my way through unlocking all the stuff. To unlock something, you usually have to spend Titanite shards and sometimes these keys. So, when you enter the tower, you are now presented with the Altar of the Three Fates. At the very least, you're presented with this if you have the meta progression unlocked. This allows you to enhance a weapon in a variety of ways. So let's say I really wanted to make a throwing axe build. I could allocate a whole bunch of points into roll rate multiplier, which would make it much more likely to roll in the shop. But this costs a lot of Titanite. That's because you have 10 total points you can allocate, but each one costs more than the last when placed in the same effect. It's very cheap at the start, and it gets much more expensive later. So instead, I might want to split this between roll rate multiplier and damage. After all, if I'm going to make a throwing axe build, I want my throwing axes to do damage. And as you can see, I now have a 30 cost down from 50. If I wanted to further reduce that, then I could split it up even more, maybe like this. With 3322, it's down to a mere 18 Titanite. Early on, this is a resource that you should invest largely into your meta progression, but later this does open up and you're able to allocate far more towards just rolling the things you want and constructing specific builds. There are 3 altars, so you get to do this 3 times. Oh, and in addition, you can roll items instead of weapons. Though there is a little bit of a difference. Like, on items, you get the power-up bonus and the roll rate multiplier. No damage and crit because these things can't be used to attack, at least not directly. But hey, if you want 6 armor from your bracers, you can do that with a power-up bonus. Again, though, I recommend splitting things to save on cost, unless you're really planning to push super far into the endless mode. Also, this is completely optional. I could just walk past all 3 of these altars, go right in here, and the run would start. But if you're going to start the run, you might need a good build. And so I want to talk about some of the builds that I've played, found success with, and just enjoyed. The first build that I found success with was the sword build. It's the same one that I demonstrated earlier because I was feeling a little bit nostalgic. This is easy to assemble on most of the melee characters, and it's particularly nice on any aspect that has armor synergies, because longswords provide armor. You can grab a couple of those, add the armor items, then fill your inventory with as many short swords as possible to maximize their bonus per sword in your inventory. Next up, add on a bit of lifesteal for your recovery layer and you're good to go. The reason I think this is such a good beginner strategy is because there's a lot of solid tier 1 and 2 items for this build. They provide armor, they provide lifesteal, they provide melee damage. In general, it's gonna feel good. The only thing that you might be struggling with a little bit is movement speed, so you might get hit more, but you'll be tanky enough that shouldn't be a big problem as long as you remember to dash boss mechanics. This also means that you get the core of your build early on, and you don't need to spend as much time rerolling the shop or stacking luck to get going. To be clear, you should still reroll the shop, and you should still buy luck items, don't just sit on your gold. But it's not as important as if you were playing some of the other builds, such as a setup that requires a high-end move speed item. To make it even easier, play an aspect whose starting item lets you scale your damage off of armor, or scale your melee weapons very easily, or just play the Juggernaut, because the Juggernaut's a really good beginner-friendly character in my opinion. And hey, if you think swords are boring, well, I think you're boring. No, actually, it's totally fine to not like swords. But if you want a melee weapon alternative that even has a little bit more coverage, go flails, they're pretty cool. Now, another very fun build, especially if you like projectiles, is bow stack. You load your inventory full of cross-revolvers and automatic crossbows, because both of these have a fairly high rate of fire and they scale very well. Plus, the final hit on the cross Volver is an automatic crit, so crit chance isn't as important. And when I first started out with the game, one of the things that I struggled with was balancing all the different stats, like how do I get enough movement speed and enough armor to survive and enough life to survive and recovery and also crit and also damage. Well, with the guaranteed crit, sure, crit's still good, just like how luck is still good on the sword build, but it's not quite as critical. Also, if you have the DLC, this build gets even cooler, like you get a literal shotgun that sometimes shoots grenades, and I can't think of many things more badass than a grenade shotgun. Third up, maybe magic's more of your thing. Well, I have a caster build that revolves around the electric wand in the early game, before scaling into the end game with heavy fireball thanks to the fireball staff. The electric wand causes arcs of lightning to chain between foes, and it does a really good job in the early game. It provides clear on a budget, it's very common, so very easy to roll in the shop, and it only requires 2 items to combine so you can tier them up really quickly. But its single target isn't that impressive, which is where fire weapons come in, especially the fireball staff, but honestly a lot of them are pretty good. These inflict Ignite, a stacking damage over time effect, which you can use to burn your foes to ash. And hey, super late game, there's even an unlock for a legendary that basically hits your entire screen. You're seeing some footage of it right now. It's fucking awesome. It also makes it basically impossible to dodge stuff, but hey, if all your enemies are dead, you don't need to dodge. Now, with that said, there are plenty of other builds in the game and plenty of other build archetypes to explore, especially if you have the DLC. So, feel free to experiment, especially after you get your first couple wins. If you unlock a new character, try them. If you unlock a new aspect, try them. If you unlock a new weapon, either try it out in the armory or try it out for real. See how it feels, see how you like it. And the game's easy enough that you don't have to play the most optimal meta best thing, at least not unless you're planning to push super far into the endless. If you just want to beat wave 20, play what's fun. Speaking of that DLC though, it does add some interesting playstyles, so let's get into a few of those now. The first thing that the Eternal Nightmare DLC adds is a whole new zone to explore. It has tougher enemies, and it's a bit more interactive, because instead of just the standard barrels and traps, you now have objectives, which could be something like this big old statue that you need to smash because, fun fact, it's a gold piñata. Sometimes they have other goodies like gems. Don't worry, we'll get to gems later. Or you might find a treasure chest, where you need to stand in the radius of a chest until it opens, or until it attacks you, because they do that sometimes. No, perfectly normal. Chests just attack people. It's Adventuring 101. In addition, there are 3 new characters, the Plague Doctor, the Occultist, and the Treasure Hunter, plus some new items and build archetypes to go along with them. The Plague Doctor, for example, is my favorite of the 3, and he is the perfect complement for all of the new plague weapons. This is your standard poison archetype. Visibility-wise, yeah, it's about as bad as fire magic, but you can't argue with the results. And again, you don't need to dodge if all the enemies are dead. Now, as much as I wanted to like the poison daggers, they're a bit short range for my taste. They do absolutely insane damage once you get going, but they're a little bit tricky. So instead, one of my favorite things to do is build around the alchemy launchers. It's not quite as fast firing as all the crossbows build that I mentioned earlier, but it is fairly easy to get started. It scales very well into the late game, especially if you go with a move speed and dodge focused version, so you can run around. There's even a fun poison tank thing that you can put on your back and just run around leaving a trail of poison. And it's a grenade launcher. That's right, the alchemy launcher is the poison flask equivalent of a grenade launcher. Oh, and there's even an archetype that you can use to make poisoned enemies explode and poison with non-poison weapons. Yeah, lots of cool stuff on the Plague Doctor and the poison archetype as a whole. Something else added with DLC was all of the summon items. And I haven't played many Bullet Heaven games with a summoning archetype, but it works surprisingly well. Not only are all the minions very good at distracting enemies, so a lot of the time you don't need to dodge because you just don't get attacked, but they did something really cool that does a good job of tying the summoning items back into the inventory management part of the game, because a lot of them have adjacency bonuses. So if you're playing a melee build, there's a summon item, the Ice Golem, that you can get that just boosts all of your melee power. Also, there's sometimes summon effects that scale off of your melee or magic power, so there's some really fun synergies here where you don't just have to be a pure summoner, you can be a character who happens to do some summoning in addition to their regular build. But also, if you want to play the traditional minion army and stick every summon under the sun on your character, go for it. And then last up, there is the Treasure Hunter class, who's the archetype built around gems. And this reminds me a lot of backpack battles, where gems could be socketed into weapons or placed in your inventory. Here, Each gem has a different effect depending on if you place it into your inventory, where there's some adjacency stuff you have to keep things in radius, directly into a weapon where it enhances that weapon, or directly into a summon where it enhances that summon. It also reminds me a little bit of gem crafting that I spend way too much time playing with and merging gems to get the best ones. Though unfortunately I can't mix colors here. Please let me mix colors or maybe just make a new gemcraft game. Either way. And so in short, the Eternal Nightmare DLC adds a lot more gameplay options, while also through the second map increasing the complexity and difficulty. Which I think is good because it keeps the base game approachable. If anything, if you buy the DLC right away and you get overwhelmed if you go into a new map, just go back to the original map. A lot of the new items are OP there. You will breeze through and give yourself plenty of time to acclimate to the new stuff. Plus, you get to play a summoner, and that alone makes it worthwhile in my opinion. And so, those are my thoughts on God of Weapons, a game that I feel has aged like wine, because when I initially played it, and where I put a good chunk, like 50-ish, maybe 60% of my playtime in, I wasn't really into it. It was okay, but it was pretty easy, and it just wasn't what I was looking for from a game at the time. However, when they released the DLC, they also brought a whole bunch of quality of life updates, especially around things like the Altar of Fate and the Banishes, which makes putting together a build you want to play much more consistent, that makes it feel much better. And also they added a bunch of new items, which lets the inventory management part of the game, the thing that it was doing really well, start to shine. Because, let's be honest, you're not playing most of the Vampire Survivors clones or Bullet Heaven games because you like walking in circles. You're doing it because you like seeing the numbers go up. You like putting together builds. You like that little hit of dopamine when you kill a boss. And this does that so much better because the buildcraft has been enhanced by a lot of the DLC content and also just the changes to the base game. I don't think the DLC is specifically mandatory, but I do highly recommend it because of how much it adds. And also, I noticed that the game doesn't have that many reviews. It's got a little over 2,000 as of the time that I'm recording this, so I suspect there's a good number of other people who played it initially and maybe like myself, bounced off of it a little bit, where they're like, this is cool, but it needs just a little bit more. So if you're one of those people watching this video because you're wondering what happened to that game I played a while ago, I'd say now is the time to give God of Weapons another shot, because with the updates, it has that now. Now with that said, if you want to see my thoughts on other Bullet Heaven games, I'll link a couple up in the card and down below. Most recently, I played Megabonk, which, while it is Bullet Heaven, is also a roguelike and a Risk of Rain 2-like, you could say. It blends genres in a really interesting way, and I think that's why it's been so addicting. On the other hand, if you want to see some of my thoughts on my favorite Bullet Heaven game, Rotato, the one that I put over 300 hours in, I'll also link that video up in the card and down below. It's from before the DLC, but trust me, Rotato, DLC or no DLC, awesome. 100% recommend that as well. But anyway, with that said, if you like what you saw, you're interested in the game, and you want to see more, do be sure to leave a like to tell the algorithm to share the video. Also, hop into my Discord, join the community, and give yourself a notification roll so you can see everything I upload. With that said, I'm going to get going for now, so thank you very much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.